W-H-I-T-N-E-Y. Who's that girl? It's Whitney Reynolds. Oh, she's got a show. Catch it on the weekends. Every single Saturday, right at noon. On Chicago's NBC 5.2.
Hello and welcome to Weekends with Whitney. I'm your host, Whitney Reynolds. Today we are talking about child abuse. Now, some of you might be thinking that April was Child Abuse Month and we are in May, but this is not a cause or a topic that just should be talked about in 1 month. We should bring light to this issue all the time because it's going on. Now, Marco Foster, my first guest here, some of you might recognize because he's been in the social scene in Chicago for a number of years, the model scene. I mean, you do a little bit of it all, but you really love causes. You love to put your name behind different things. Thanks, Marco, for coming on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me, Whitney.
Yeah, I'm excited you're here because people probably are at home and they recognize you. I mean, you're all over Facebook, Twitter, and you team up with a lot of charities. But it's with One Hope United, who does talk about foster care and child abuse, that you have a passion for because you actually have a real life story that's connected with it.
Yes, most definitely. One Hope United, the reason why I really wanted to work with One Hope United is because they not only deal with children, but they also deal with the parents as well, helping the children.
I love that. And so we're going to actually have One Hope United on the show later. But first of all, I want to talk about your story. You know, they deal with foster kids and they deal with children that have been abused. Now, in the foster care system, whenever abuse is going on in a home, now this is not your story, but they go into the foster system if there's abuse going on in the home. And you actually were a foster child yourself.
Yes, I was a foster child for about 7 years. I was adopted by a fantastic lady, Marjorie Foster, which I love so much. She's a senior citizen. Did a great job with me by herself, might I add. I'll tell you this, when you are getting moved from home to home, it can be confusing sometimes. There's a lot of emotions that go on when you're in the DCFS system and you're just trying to get your place.
And that system is where kids, they go. Walk us through that a little bit, because I know for me, I don't know a ton about it. You were taken from your home, and do you go to like a main area where there's tons of kids, or do they immediately place you in another home?
Well, to be honest with you, I was very young when that started. When I was old enough to really remember, it's more, I had my social worker, and then they're basically trying to place you. So, Marco, what do you like, and what kind of people, and you're a child trying to answer these type of questions.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
And it's almost you're not gonna get the proper responses from a child at the age of 4 or 5.
Absolutely, and then you put abuse on top of that, and that can be really confusing.
Most definitely, because they don't really know what it is,
Absolutely. I know for me as a kid, when my parents went through their divorce, and I still had both parents in my life, my hands peeled. It was one of those things that as like a kid, I didn't express myself enough, but my hands actually just started peeling, and it was something that I never experienced before, but it was because it was very unfamiliar. This was not my normal, typical life that I was used to. So I can only imagine as a little kid, you throw abuse, and then you throw going from home to home. I mean, how many different homes were you in?
Enough.
Was that because you were a troublemaker?
No, you know what, I will tell you this. With the one thing, like I said, with One Hope United, that really makes it a special program is because these children who are getting moved around and they don't have a home, you've got a lot of built-up emotions when it comes to uncertainty, to anger, fear of where they're going to be the next week or month. One Hope United, they also help the parents deal with the children that come with all this baggage. Wow. And because it takes a special skill, not everyone can be a foster parent.
Right.
Because it takes a special skill to be able to take that child who has all those emotions and make them feel like they're in a home, even if it's for a short amount of time. So that's a big deal of the reason why I like One Hope United.
That is, yeah. I'm anxious to get them on the set and talk to them about that. But you did. Let's finish your story. You did get adopted.
Yes.
And you love your mama. I mean, she adopted you when you were 7?
Yes.
Okay.
Love my mom. She's fantastic. And it's ironic and funny that her last name was Foster. So
Wow.
I took on her last name.
So Marco Foster is your adopted name, and you went ahead and took it on. It's something that means a lot to you, your personal story. That's why you give back to One Hope United.
Most definitely.
I love that. So thank you so much for volunteering. Would you encourage other people to get out there and do it?
Well, of course. I mean, especially if you have children, it's a perfect way to give back. You know, and it only takes one day a month to mentor a child.
That's awesome.
And just giving them a different world.
Absolutely.
Because taking it from someone who grew up on the south side of Chicago, it's a completely different world on the south side, the west side of Chicago, where generally these type of poverty, abuse, things like that are happening. You know, even though it happens everywhere, but from my personal experience, where you see the rougher parts of the city, when you're able to go over there and, or even take a child with you to a different area and say, hey, this is, you know, there's other things to life.
Absolutely.
And it really opens up a child's eyes, and they can see the future.
And that is the truth. You know, children are the next generation, so it's important to sow back into them. Thank you so much, Marco, for coming on. Guys, coming up next, he talked about One Hope United. We're going to get them on the set right after this break. This portion of Weekends with Whitney is brought to you by AMA Med Spa. The largest medical spa in Illinois has arrived at Deer Park Town Center next to Pier 1. AMA Med Spa, owned by Dr. Lisa Gulcher, provides non-surgical cosmetic procedures. This 4,000 square foot state-of-the-art facility provides not only Botox and other injectables, but also 12 different aesthetic laser procedures. Dr. Gulcher and her dedicated staff will create a treatment plan that fits your needs and budget. Please come by and visit their new amazing med spa and meet their highly experienced and personal staff. You will understand why their clients love them so much. Walk-ins are welcome. Call 847-719-2200 for a free consultation, or visit their website, www.amamedspa.com. Check them out on Facebook under Advanced Medical Aesthetics. Hello and welcome back to Weekends with Whitney. I'm your host, Whitney Reynolds. Today we've been talking about child abuse, and I'm joined now by the Executive Director of One Hope United, Mark McHugh. Welcome to the set.
Thank you, Whitney.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
I'm glad you're here because we got a little bit of a snapshot from Marco about One Hope United, but you guys stand for so much when it comes to child abuse and even stability among families. Tell us a little bit about One Hope United.
Sure. Well, our mission is to protect children and strengthen families. And this child abuse is a particularly important issue because every 19 minutes a child is abused in Illinois. And
wow, 19 minutes.
Yes.
Every 19 minutes. So,
every 19 minutes.
So basically 3 times every hour.
That's right.
Yeah. So every 19 minutes a child's abused in Illinois.
That's right. And every 7 hours a child under the age of 1 dies from abuse.
Oh my goodness. That's shocking. That's one of the things on this show that I like to bring light to, is like something that we might not realize is something that, you know, child abuse is something that we hear of, and especially in April, a lot of light was brought onto it because it was Child Abuse Month. But this is something we should talk about all the time. I mean, those numbers are shocking.
It is. It happens every day. It happens in all kinds of families. And it's important not only to deal with the issues after it happens, but to prevent it before it happens.
Absolutely. So with One Hope United, when do you guys step in? Is it after the abuse has taken place, or you do preventative stuff all the time?
Well, what's nice about our organization is that One Hope United has an array of services that can deal with any particular situation. And so, for example, the foster care situation that Marco talked about is an important part of what we do. We We have foster families throughout the state of Illinois and serve hundreds of foster children who are in the system. And our job is to not only find the right home that gives those children a loving experience and a nurturing experience, but to find a way to get them to a permanent home.
That's what I was wondering. Whenever you are a foster parent, do you always leave kind of the door open to adopt, or is sometimes foster parents are just foster parents?
It really can go either way, Whitney. The important thing is that for the time being, there's the right home for the child. And the first thing that we try to do is to reunite that child with his or her parents. If that's not possible, then we find an adoptive home, because the most important thing is that that child find a permanent loving home.
Right. Now, if there is abuse in a family, let's say a child is abused and they go into the foster care system, is there any way for that parent to get back their child once abuse has taken place?
Sure, there certainly is. And once that's happened, it's a matter of that family, that parent or those parents kind of coming to grips with the underlying issues that led them to child abuse in the first place. So whether that's drug and alcohol abuse or very poor parenting techniques or depression, those issues have to be dealt with by our therapists before they can have their kids back.
Yeah, I am curious what basically constitutes abuse. I mean, I'm wondering, because I know for me, like growing up in the South, whenever we were in trouble and my friends on the block, I mean, it didn't matter if we were at my house or my friends' parents' homes, they would spank. But it wasn't ever crazy spanking. I would say I never had like a whelp left. But how do you know when it is abuse?
Well, we're not talking about spanking. We're talking about abuse that leaves physical and emotional marks on children.
So it doesn't just have to be physical?
It doesn't have to be physical. Emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, all leave their mark in one way or another.
Can spanking turn into abuse in some sense?
Well, spanking and abuse are just two very different things. And I think many people think, well, some people think I can do what I'd like with my child. It's only spanking, but it's not what we're talking about. Corporal punishment is not something that I subscribe to, but that's different than abusing your child in a physical way.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just so curious with that, because I could see, whenever you were saying like preventing what can happen, if someone is angry and they do decide to spank or something like that, that it could lead into abuse or whatnot. But
certainly when parents lose control, that can happen.
That's what, yeah.
But that's where our prevention programs really come into play, is to work with families before it gets to that point. To help them understand what good parenting is, to learn and use coping mechanisms so that their anger doesn't get the better of them. And to help rely on other people. I mean, nobody can be a parent on their own.
Absolutely.
Right? It really does take a village, and to have that kind of support system, whether it's grandparents or friends, neighbors, people who can help you out so you're not in it alone.
Absolutely. I think those are some great points. Thank you, Mark, for coming on.
Thank you, Whitney.
Okay, guys, if you see something, say something. You can always make a confidential call to 1-800-25-ABUSE. We'll be right back. This portion of Weekends with Whitney is brought to you by K-Page Salon. Want that W3 look from hair to makeup and even skin? Call 773-477-3000 and get that Whitney look. Hello and welcome back to Weekends with Whitney. I'm your host, Whitney Reynolds. Today we've been talking about child abuse, and we are now joined by a supervisor for One Hope United, Liza Simon Roper. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Whitney.
I'm glad you're here because you are going to break down the different types of abuse when it comes to children, because I know for me, I just think of the physical abuse, but there are so many more.
Yes, and I'm really glad to talk about this topic, because physical abuse is the abuse that's obvious. That's what people see, and a lot of people think about that. But probably the most hurtful type of abuse is actually neglect.
Oh, I didn't even think of that one whenever I was listing them off in my head, but neglect.
Yes.
Forget about that.
Yes. When we're talking about the effects of abuse, what we're really talking about is childhood trauma. And with childhood trauma, there are a variety of things that happen, but probably the two most painful things for kids is that they develop a lack of trust. They're not able to trust these adults in the world that are supposed to take care of them, that are supposed to love them, that are supposed to nurture them. They can't trust that. And so they begin to see the world as a very threatening place.
Absolutely. I think you were the one that we were talking about this during the commercial break, that there's no like instruction manual whenever it comes to parenting. We only know from our parents. So if you think about it, it can be passed down from generation to generation.
And frequently is.
Oh, okay. So you said neglect is one of the biggest things that you see.
Yes.
Okay. Why is that? Is it that parents are just, and whenever we're talking about neglect, I immediately think of a child that is not being fed, talked to. I mean, what types of different neglect are there?
Well, there's those, but there's also the kind of neglect of a parent who might have a mental illness, or the neglect of a substance abusing parent, or the neglect of a parent who has to work 5 jobs in order to make ends meet. So there's neglect that may be totally unintentional, but still has an impact on a child's life.
Absolutely. What would you recommend if parents are wondering if they fall in that category of neglect? Is there a certain way they can look into their own lives, or is it something that, like, you guys have counselors where you can help them adjust their schedules? Well,
we certainly have counselors that, when these kinds of families come to the attention of the agency, we have counselors who work with the families. And as Mark was talking about earlier, we have therapists who work with the biological parents to help children go home. So we certainly have that service.
How often do parents inquire about themselves? Like, is this abuse, is this neglect, or is it always someone else turning them in?
Usually there is a crisis of some sort, but it's an interesting question. I don't get those calls very often, but this week I actually got 2. So it's, of parents who are recognizing in themselves that there was something not right here.
So we talked about neglect. What about verbal abuse?
Well, that also is very painful for children, because verbal abuse is basically giving them the message that they are bad. And so that involves this whole feeling of shame, that there's something wrong with them as human beings on the planet. And so they don't see themselves as very lovable or likable. And that's hugely painful for kids.
It's so interesting. I was raised in a family where my mom overly praised us. And so people always say, like, Whitney, your self-esteem could never be challenged. But it's because my mom always, you know, I'm so proud of you. Look, you're reading, you're walking, you're being human. You know, my mom was overly proud. But I feel like the reverse effect can take place a lot. You know, like, I always walked loud and proud. Whereas, like, if a parent is beating down the child, or maybe not giving them even the praise that they need, they could walk around almost insecure about life.
Verbal abuse can be very scarring for children. But one of the things, I just want to add this because I think it's so important that people know that in spite of these really horrific sorts of effects, this is a very hopeful situation. Kids are so resilient.
I love that. I love that you're talking about the hope in that, because that is one thing that I always want to learn from my past experiences. And I feel like if kids that are now adults can take what they learn, like almost like what Marco said in the beginning of the show, where yes, he was in foster care, but he's now giving back. He took his experiences, making a difference with it.
Yeah, and isn't he a great example of just how resilient kids can be?
Absolutely, and I love the hope factor. One Hope United is absolutely amazing. Tell us about these pins we're wearing.
These pins are pins that just commemorate Child Abuse Month, we wear them in honor of kids who have been abused, and so that we don't forget.
And Child Abuse Month was in April.
Yes.
But we are going to wear these year-round right here.
I think that's a great idea.
I love it. Thank you so much, Liza, for coming on.
You bet.
Guys, coming up next, we are going to talk about a real-life case study. We'll be right back. This portion of Weekends with Whitney is brought to you by Celebrity Skin Couture Air Tan. Want that summer glow without hurting your skin? Call 773-697-4833 or stop by their location at 1652 West North Avenue. Hello and welcome back to Weekends with Whitney. I'm Whitney Reynolds, your host. Today we've been talking about child abuse, and I'm joined by someone that actually has studied a lot into it. Adrienne Patterson-Green, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
You've looked at case studies about child abuse, and I feel like this is really fascinating because you're going to be able to give us really an inside look.
Well, I am a supervisor for our WINGS program, which is a prevention program for pregnant and parenting teens. And in that program, we work with the most vulnerable of clients, because these are teens who are most likely to abuse or neglect their children simply because they don't have any parenting skills. So this is a very high-risk population.
Wow. So WINGS is a division of One Hope United?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about how One Hope United got started, and then we'll go to the WINGS part.
Okay, well, the story is that there were some children that were hungry, and they went to a house and they looked inside and they saw the a family eating, and so the Reverend and his wife came out and they brought him in, and that was like the start of One Hope United. And so it started as an orphanage. From that one gesture started where we are today.
Wow, and now it's a staple here in Chicago.
Yes.
And so the WINGS program goes right in and it works with
pregnant and parenting teens between the ages of 16 and 23, although we do have some as young as 14 in the program.
Oh my goodness. And so it's all to help prevent this from happening again.
Yes, yes. As I said earlier, this population, they are the most vulnerable for abuse and neglect. And so this is a really helpful program because a lot of times when they discover that they're pregnant, they're afraid to tell their parents.
And especially if you said 14 years old.
Yeah, so we've had some as young as 14, some younger than that. But yeah, and the one case that comes to mind, we had a 15-year-old who was pregnant. She was 5 months before she told her family. And that was very critical because, you know, when you're pregnant, you have to get that prenatal as soon as you find out. And a lot of times the teens put their children at risk because they simply don't get the prenatal.
What does the prenatal mean? I'm sorry, I'm out of it. What is the prenatal?
Oh, it's the doctor's appointments. When you find out you're pregnant, you have to go to your prenatal appointments. And so a lot of teens, because they don't have the support or they don't understand the whole process, they neglect to do that. And that's a form of abuse even while the baby's in the womb.
Wow.
So the unique thing about our program is that we can start working with them as soon as they find out they're pregnant. We can go in and assist them and we support them. And this teen, as I said, was 15 years old when she discovered she was pregnant. She was previously a client of One Hope United through our Intact Family program.
Wow.
And
do you see that sometimes, kids that maybe came through the system as kids?
Absolutely. Yeah, she was, her mother actually was a substance abuser and she needed some assistance. So that's how they initially came to One Hope United. And then they, when she became pregnant, she was re-referred by another agency to the WINGS program. And so we began working with her and she had her first baby and she subsequently had another baby, which is common, you know, for teens. She had another baby and we continued to work with her. Now, she was a difficult client initially. She was gang involved. She was living a very high-risk lifestyle, and then she had 2 girls. She was starting to get on the right track. She wanted to be involved in our After School Matters program, which is
I love After School Matters.
Yeah, it's becoming one of my favorite. That's a program that I also oversee. And so she wanted to be involved in our program. She did very well on the interview. She decided she wanted to make some changes. She made one bad decision to go to a party, and she got arrested. She ended up having a gun in her possession. She had spent some days in the Cook County Jail, and at that point, you know, she decided again that she wanted to try and start over. But she had some rough patches here and there. She had to seek some mental health services, but all through all this, we were there with her.
Absolutely.
You know,
so it's almost like getting to walk through it with
Absolutely.
her, and knowing that she had the support group. So tell us, did she change? Did she? Are the kids okay?
Well, yes.
Okay. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, she is actually. She was just with us about a month ago with one of our workshops where we had the clients come in, and we had a doctor from the University of Chicago to come in, and they gave the clients the opportunity to talk about, you know, questions that they have about their children, because a lot of times with teen parents, they are intimidated by the doctors, and so they don't know how to advocate for their children. So this was a workshop to give them. And she was there with her 2 kids. She's working full time. She is getting her own apartment. She purchased her first vehicle, got her driver's license.
She is on the right track.
And she is engaged to be married. So we are so very proud of her. Yes.
And thanks for opening up and giving us a real life example of how you guys are making a difference.
Absolutely.
One Hope United really feels like they're giving hope to the community out there.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, you've heard it. We've talked about child abuse today and ways that you can get involved. It shouldn't just be about 1 month, a year that we talk about it. It should be all the time. And make sure to stay aware and report any abuse you see out there. For more info on the show, go to weekendswithwhitney.com. We'll see you right back here next weekend.